Every morning had always begun the same way. I woke with the soft light filtering gently through the old lace curtains, the delicate scent of earth and blooms carrying through the open window as if to greet me personally. My garden was my refuge, a small, quiet sanctuary where all the weight of the world could pause for a moment. It was a patch of earth filled with life, memories, and the delicate whispers of days long past. Each rose and hydrangea that bloomed there held a fragment of happiness, stories woven into their petals like invisible threads. Cradling a warm porcelain cup of tea between my hands, I would sit by the window, the steam rising and mingling with that garden scent as I watched the sun slowly paint the sky with hues of soft pink and gold. It was in those slow, peaceful moments that I treasured the echo of a family life that had once filled this home. Laughter spilling through the rooms, the soft murmur of voices, the warmth that had been the thread holding us together. That morning, I moved through the garden as I always had, pruning dead leaves from the roses, my fingers gentle but steady. The breeze danced lightly around me, carrying away the quiet solitude. My thoughts drifted to the last family gathering, not so long ago, when Thomas and Abigail had come with the children, laughter floating beneath the branches of the old oak tree. I remembered how I smiled then, quietly hopeful, believing those moments would never fade, imagining the future stretched out warmly before us. Yet even as the memory wrapped around me, a subtle unease clung at the edges, like a whisper of winter hiding beneath the warmth of the sun. Inside the kitchen, I reached for the keys resting on the counter where they always lay, their familiar weight a comforting anchor. But today they were not there. First a flicker of confusion, then a sharp wave of alarm. I searched the entire counter twice, heart tightening with each passing second. The silence that surrounded me suddenly felt heavier. I moved toward the front door and grasped the handle, expecting the familiar cool touch and the gentle click of the lock releasing. Instead, resistance met me, a cold, unfamiliar metal that refused to turn. The lock had been changed. I stared, fingertips pressed against it, disbelief settling over me like a shroud. The chill that wound through my body was sharper than any winter's morning, freezing my breath and tightening a knot deep in my chest. I stood there longer than reasonable, breathing shallowly as the silence pressed in all around me, louder than any shouted word of betrayal. No note on the door, no explanation left behind. Just this impenetrable barrier, shutting me out from the home I had poured my life into. Any stranger who passed by would see only a locked door, but to me, it was the custodian of a lifetime. Walls that had witnessed childhood footsteps, countless celebrations, tears, and laughter alike. It was more than bricks and mortar. It was a living scrapbook of love and endurance. Now it had become a fortress meant only to exclude. My fingers lingered against that harsh metal, a shivers crawling up my spine, not just from the cold, but from a sting that reached far beneath the surface. Tears threatened to spill, hot and bitter, but I shut them back, swallowing hard against the lump that rose in my throat. Pain beat in waves, sharp and relentless, a betrayal that cut deeper than mere loss. The sanctuary that had sheltered me became a monument to broken trust, a cavernous emptiness where love once flourished. I stood quietly at that locked door, the weight of memories pressing down on me. My mind flickered to the signs that I had missed, or perhaps ignored. Abigail's polite smiles that never quite reached her eyes, her clipped and measured words in conversations not meant for my ears. Thomas, my son, caught between loyalty to his wife and the duty I had raised him with, his voice faltering when faced with conflict, his gaze sometimes avoiding mine. How long had these fractures been hiding beneath the surface of family life? How had I believed the house would hold us together when the real bonds were quietly unraveling? I remembered the unanswered phone calls, the invitations that stopped coming, the small favors withdrawn without reason. The laughter and warmth that once filled these rooms now felt like echoes boxed behind a locked door. Standing in the chill, I faced a truth I could no longer deny. The unconditional love I had given was met only with cold neglect, replaced by silence and distance. The years of sacrifice, patience, and care evaporated like mist under the blazing sun of betrayal. Yet beneath the sting of loss, a quiet flame stirred. The burden of grief weighed heavy, but it also sharpened something fierce inside me. I was not defined by their abandonment or this slammed door. Deep down, where love still lingered, a mother's instinct to protect and fight for her family, especially my innocent grandchildren, kindled steadily. I would not be forgotten. I would not vanish into silence. Turning away from that unyielding door, I carried the ache with me, a weight I could not yet shake. But within it, the faintest spark of resolve had ignited. The house might have shut me out, but I was no stranger to hardship. I had weathered harsher winters in my 70 years, and I would find a way back, not just inside these walls, but into the heart of what truly mattered, the family I loved and the legacy I refused to surrender. This locked door marked not just an ending, but the start of something else. A wound that would leave its mark, yes, but also a summons to stand tall, to bear my burden with quiet dignity, and to fight for bonds that no luck could sever. The ache was heavy, but beneath it lay the steady pulse of a strength they could never break, a mother's resolve that would not be silenced. In the quiet that followed, after the doors stayed shut and the weight of exclusion settled heavily on my shoulders, an unexpected clarity began to emerge. It was not rage that stirred within me, nor bitter reproach. Instead, beneath the fog of hurt, there grew a calm determination, the kind that has long been forged through years of patience and quiet endurance. I had always been the steady one, the one who held the pieces together when others faltered. If this was a fracture, it would not be the end of my story as I once feared. It would become the crucible for something new. I found refuge within my memories, those tender moments that had woven the fabric of my life, and in revisiting them, I found fresh strength. I saw my children as they were when they were small, Thomas's tiny hand held in mine as we strolled through this very garden, our laughter mingling with the sentinel trees. Abigail's smiles, once warmer and genuine before shadows fell between us. Most of all, I clung to the innocent faces of my grandchildren, the living pulse of our family legacy, and the reason I would fight with every breath I had left. This reflection was not an escape, but a shield. I reaffirmed a belief that was not easily shaken. Family is not merely built on the houses we live in or the contracts we sign. It is a force far deeper, woven from blood, memories, and trust. The cold silence I now faced was a cruel distortion of that truth, but it would not shatter me. I knew strength did not always scream. It often whispered through patience, resilience, and understanding. Day after day, I watched from the window as life went on behind the closed doors. The fresh locks gleamed under the sun, an ever-present reminder of the boundary drawn between me and the life I had known. I observed Abigail's movements, calculated, always alert, a quiet storm wrapped in a polite smile. Thomas seemed caught in an invisible struggle, the tension between his wife's ambitions and his mother's stolid presence causing his hesitations. Their closeness to each other was unmistakable, but the distance they kept from me was a wound that cut deep. Yet I was no stranger to storms. I had faced cruel gusts and freezing nights before, and my strength had grown stronger for it. I resolved not to return their rejection with fury, but to meet it with calculated restraint. I chose to listen, to watch, and to learn, understanding that silence could tell me more than bitterness ever would. Patience would be my ally, a steadfast armor against the rising tide. I let my pain simmer quietly, feeding the ember of resolve that burned within. It was during these long hours that I recognized something fundamental. This was no ordinary falling out. This was a deliberate strategy, one I had been blind to for too long. Patience would be my ally, a steadfast armor against the rising tide. Abigail's subtle maneuvers, the quick deflections when I asked about the house or the trust, the careful changing of documents out of my sight, were not accident or whim. They were calculated moves, a game of control I had been unwilling to play until now. Thomas's silence was not weakness but conflict, a boy caught between the mother who raised him and the woman he had married. Still, my heart was not hardened by anger. Instead, there was a profound sorrow in realizing how far they had pushed me away. It hurt that the people I loved had turned this cold silence into a wall between us. But sorrow alone would not carry me through. No, it was a spark, the first note in a symphony of quiet determination. Beneath all of this bruising loss throbbed the deepest truth: my grandchildren. Their futures lay in the balance, bound to the legacy and the trust that I had once presumed secure. That love, the pure, fierce love for those small lives dependent on me, kindled the fierce protection I had always felt but never fully exercised. It whispered that I was not powerless, no matter how abandoned I felt. So there, within the stillness of my home, I made a vow in the depths of my soul. I would stand firm, not with loud protest, but with the steady strength of a mother who knows what is at stake. My fight would be patient, deliberate, and unyielding. I would keep the flame of hope alive, nurturing it in the dark until it burst into light. I knew I was stepping into unfamiliar territory. The quiet betrayal suggested that matters well beyond the front door were at play. The trust, the legal papers I thought I understood or trusted others to manage, they were now questions to be answered. I realized I had been kept in the dark, set aside as decisions were made without me, decisions that threatened to erase my claim not just to the house, but to the future of those I loved most. It was a bitter awakening, but a necessary one, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face that truth head-on. My mind began to sketch out a plan, not yet fully formed, but no longer just a flicker. I would gather knowledge, observe every detail, and wait for the right moment to act. This quiet retaliation would take time, but it would be thorough. Every omission, every silence, every small betrayal had given me clues, and I was learning how to read them. I was older, yes, but my spirit was far from diminished. If anything, the years had ruled me a quiet teacher, imbuing my calm with steel. I learned that silence, when wielded with reasoning and patience, could cut deeper than any shout. And as the days passed, I embraced this silent resolve. It was painful to be cast aside, but painfulness breeds strength when tended carefully. I found solace in the moments alone, combing through memories and gathering courage from the roots of my past. Those long-ago family dinners and birthday parties weren't just nostalgia, but reminders of the bonds that had once felt unbreakable. This was no impulsive stand. It was a measured, deliberate response crafted by years of quiet observation. I would reclaim my place, not through anger or desperation, but through clarity and patience. I would watch. I would wait. And when the time was right, I would rise with a power born not from fury, but from love, and the unwavering resolve of a mother defending her family's legacy. The first step was to understand, fully and meticulously, the tangled web that now defined my family's future. I knew I could not navigate this maze blindly. Throughout my years, I had learned to trust my instincts, but instincts alone could not unearth the layers of legal complexities and veiled intentions Abigail and Thomas wielded so confidently. To reclaim what was rightfully mine and protect my grandchildren's legacy, I needed allies and a clear path forward. The thought of reaching out to a lawyer stirred a quiet unease in me. Law was a world I had never truly inhabited, a realm where papers and signatures carried weight far greater than years of devotion or whispered promises. Yet I understood this world had become my battleground, and I could no longer stand at the sidelines, watching others rewrite the story of my life and family. The phone call was both mundane and monumental. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed the number of Joan, my oldest and most trusted friend, whose career as a lawyer had grown steadily over decades. Joan was sharp, no-nonsense, and had always possessed an empathetic core beneath her professional exterior. Her voice on the other end was as steady as ever, the same voice that had listened to my fears and confusions before, but this time with a tangible gravitas. We met at her office, a quiet space lined with shelves heavy with law books, the scent of worn leather and old paper filling the air. The polished surface of her desk mirrored the seriousness of our purpose. I did not cry. There were no tears left for this. What I held in my shaking hands was a folder, carefully compiled over recent days, letters, statements, the fragments of correspondence I had managed to gather. Each paper told its own part of the story, revealing the distance Abigail had built between me and the legal truths that should have never been out of my reach. As Joan picked through the documents, her sharp eyes scanned signatures and terms that had previously seemed innocuous, but now glared back at me with cold significance. The trust, once a protective measure safeguarding our grandchildren's future, had become the linchpin of a quiet usurpation. Details I had never fully understood before surfaced, clauses buried in legal jargon, the subtle shifting of control to unnamed parties, and the withholding of crucial information from me, the rightful matriarch whose love had been the foundation of it all. Joan's professional demeanor flickered momentarily, a hint of indignation surfacing beneath her calm exterior. She looked up, meeting my gaze. "Eleanor," she said softly, "what has been done here borders on betrayal, not just family, but legal. They never expected you to uncover these documents or to understand their full weight, but now they know they can no longer dismiss you." The weight of her words settled like stone in my chest. For too long I had been silent, discounted, dismissed as irrelevant. But here, in this room, with Joan's unwavering support, I felt the stirrings of power returning, slow and sure. With every document analyzed, every seemingly insignificant detail pieced together, a plan began to form. It was no longer simply about retrieval. It was about reclaiming dignity, legitimacy, and the home I had lost. Days blurred into nights as I pored over the papers Joan sent me home with, highlighting sections, contemplating strategies, and mentally rehearsing conversations I would soon have to face. Each clause became a puzzle piece, and as I carefully assembled the picture, I realized how cunning Abigail's hand had been. The house's ownership, the management of funds, the very decisions meant to protect the children's inheritance, each had been cleverly manipulated to sideline me. Yet, it was not just legal language that occupied my thoughts. My reflections often returned to the emotional landscape that had weathered this storm. I remembered the countless family gatherings I had orchestrated, the birthdays celebrated with laughter and care, the quiet conversations with my son when he was troubled or uncertain. Those moments felt simultaneously remote and immediate, reinforcing the tough truth. This was not just a legal battle, but a fight for the soul of my family. Through it all, my love for my grandchildren remained my guiding light. Their futures were entwined with these documents, these piles of paper that now became my weapons, not forged in anger, but in unyielding love. They deserved a grandmother who would not be pushed to the margins. They deserved the strength of a matriarch who understood patience, observation, and strategy. Working with Joan became a collaboration built on mutual respect and quiet determination. She was not just my lawyer, she became a confidant and guardian of the plan I was slowly realizing was necessary. We mapped out approaches, what to disclose, how to challenge the validity of certain transfers, which meetings would be necessary, and what evidence would dismantle Abigail's carefully constructed dominion. Meanwhile, I took care to gather subtle pieces of evidence beyond the formal documents. I listened closely for whispers in conversations, observed patterns in family behavior, and held tight to the small truths spoken in passing carelessness. These observations, when combined with Joan's legal expertise, created a tapestry that no amount of calculated silence could unravel. The days were long and sometimes lonely, but in those moments I found strength in the patience I had cultivated over a lifetime. Each small victory, a newly uncovered letter, a confirmation of ownership, proof of improper management, kindled my hope. This was not merely about property or money. This was about justice, about reclaiming the threads of my own identity that had been nearly suffocated. I thought of the front door, that cold, unyielding barrier, and found in it a metaphor for the challenges ahead. Like that door, Abigail had sought to shut me out, to lock me away as if I were a relic of the past. But doors can be opened with the right key. As I was discovering, our family trust, carefully studied and understood, was a key they had never anticipated I could wield. I practiced quiet resolve every day, reminding myself that the road ahead was long and fraught with complexity. Yet, every step I took was deliberate, practiced, and grounded in a vision far bigger than this moment of exclusion and pain. Late one evening, as I sat alone, surrounded by papers and legal books, I allowed myself a small smile. The journey ahead was daunting, yes, but it was mine to forge. My role was not diminished by their actions. If anything, it was reaffirmed in the silent courage I now nurtured. The home I had cherished was not just bricks and mortar. It was a legacy of love and sacrifice, a sanctuary I intended to reclaim for the laughter of children and the peace of generations yet to come. And so, with steady hands and a heart beating with quiet fire, I prepared to turn the key on this new chapter, not with anger, but with the careful, unwavering strength of a mother determined to protect all she held dear. The days folded into one another with a slow reverence, each marked by quiet routines that became acts of reclaiming a past threatened to disappear beneath the weight of deceit. In the loneliness of an empty house that no longer welcomed me as before, I found solace and purpose in the movement of my hands across familiar things, the delicate cracks on the frames of old photographs, the softened edges of well-loved books, the china cups that once held laughter alongside tea and stories. With steady care, I sorted through these fragments of my life, packing them with reverence, knowing each held a piece of the family's heart I was determined to preserve. These were not mere objects. They were the echoes of years spent nurturing love, building memories, and weaving together the threads of a family tapestry. The photos captured fleeting smiles from birthday parties and quiet afternoons. Each porcelain figurine, each embroidered tablecloth, whispered stories of joyful times, of moments when the world seemed whole and unbroken. As I packed these relics away, I imagined the house filled once more with the voices of children and the warmth of gathering, free from the current cold silence that now enveloped it. Alongside this quiet work, another battle was unfolding in the unseen corridors of the law. Joan, steadfast and unyielding, moved with precision, preparing the legal documents necessary to challenge the growing web Abigail had spun around our family's assets. Every letter she wrote, every filing submitted, was a silent strike against the fortress that had sought to exclude me, to rewrite the narrative of what was rightfully mine and my grandchildren's. This was more than a matter of ownership. It was a fight for justice steeped in years of trust and love, now threatened by strategic manipulation. The weight of the legalities was daunting, each document a labyrinth of language designed to confuse and obscure, but I met it with a fierce hunger to understand. I pored over contracts, trusts, and statements, learning a language I had never needed before, transforming uncertainty into clarity with every page I studied. Joan's expertise illuminated the path forward, translating cold legalese into actionable steps, revealing the frailties in Abigail's plans and the strength of my rightful claim. In Joan, I found not only a legal advocate, but an ally who believed in the righteousness of my cause. Her quiet confidence buoyed my own as we mapped strategies, gathering evidence of mismanagement, identifying discrepancies in the handling of funds, and preparing to confront the lies that had grown like weeds around my family's foundation. Together, we wove a plan grounded in truth, persistence, and the knowledge that patience often holds more power than the loudest outcry. Without Abigail and Thomas in the house, the spaces grew heavy with stillness, but this stillness was not empty. It was charged with a tense quiet, a fragile calm that seemed to wait with held breath for what was to come. Their absence softened the sharp edges that had characterized every room, every corner, where tension had once thrummed beneath the surface. The house, my sanctuary, began to whisper again, not in anger or accusation, but in hope, resilience, and restoration. Evenings became sacred moments of reflection. I would sit by the window, watching the garden I had cared for through seasons of sun and storm. Moonlight mellowed the colors of flowers and leaves, revealing a beauty that persisted beyond the harshest winters. The garden thrived quietly, much like the resolve growing within me. In the life of these blossoms, I saw a reflection of my own journey, pain giving way to strength, loss transforming into hope. My determination solidified not as fiery rage, but as a steady, unshakable calm. I learned anew that the strongest battles are often fought in silence, with patience as both shield and sword. This truth became my mantra when loneliness pressed in, when the ache of exclusion sharpened like a blade. The vision of my grandchildren's futures, bright and untarnished by betrayal, held me steady. The nights, though heavy with unspoken thoughts, brought clarity. As I sifted through legal papers and family mementos, I built the foundation of a defense not born of vengeance, but of love and steadfast purpose. Joan's guidance shaped each step, her calm professionalism turning complex documents into a map that led toward justice. I saw the outlines of success sketched in every piece of evidence gathered, every signature challenged, every truth ready to be revealed. Confidence began to replace the initial shock of rejection. I envisioned the moment I would speak with my family again, not in anger or desperation, but with the silent power of one who has waited, watched, and learned. My words would carry the weight of truth and the dignity of someone who knew her place and would defend it with patience hard-earned. This fight was about more than a house, more than money or property. It was about honoring a legacy built on years of sacrifice and love. I had always been the quiet heart of our family, and I was ready to show that my strength ran deep, fueled by the unbreakable bonds of motherhood. Looking around the rooms, each carrying a lifetime of memories and silent promises, I understood the profound responsibility resting on my shoulders. This was not just a battle for walls and keys, but for the soul of my family, a sanctuary to be restored not with rage, but with measured grace. As darkness fell and the house settled into silence, I sat alone amid memories and legal texts, a small, sure smile touching my lips. The road ahead was daunting, sprawling with hurdles I had yet to face. Yet this journey was mine to claim. My role had been challenged, yes, but it was not diminished. Instead, the silent courage I nurtured deep within had grown into a force I could rely on. With steady hands and a heart burning softly but fiercely, I prepared to open the door to this next chapter of my life. This time, I would enter not as a shattered victim, but as a mother resolute and unyielding, ready to protect the legacy, the love, and the home that were rightfully mine and my grandchildren's. The house awaited reawakening, the laughter, the love, and the peace to heal old wounds. And I would be the one to breathe life back into its walls, moving forward with quiet strength and unwavering grace. When Abigail and Thomas finally returned, the air in the house seemed to shift, thick with an invisible tension that neither of them noticed at first. They entered with the confidence of those who believe they have triumphed, their footsteps echoing briskly through the familiar halls. I watched them from my place, calmer than I had been in months, though inside a long brewing storm was ready to break. Abigail's smile was sharp and practiced, the kind that hid as much as it revealed. She walked with the certainty of someone who had already claimed victory, her words clipped and poised to assert control as if the house bore her mark alone. Thomas followed, his expression more strained, shadowed with uncertainty that he could no longer fully conceal. It was clear his loyalties were torn, caught between the wife who had led the charge and the mother he affectionately yet confusedly regarded. I greeted them with quiet composure, never lowering my gaze or faltering in my stance. The house was mine as much as theirs, if not more, and I intended to show it. The tension in the room was palpable, but there were no accusations hurled, no furious outbursts. I spoke softly, but every word carried the weight of months of preparation and a lifetime's worth of maternal resolve. Abigail opened with thinly veiled bravado. Her voice deft but cold, she recounted her decisions, each phrase laced with the air of inevitability and ownership. She spoke of the future she claimed to have secured for the family, of the house's fate now cast in her hands. Yet, behind her ornate defenses, a flicker of unease betrayed the panic that threatened to rise within her. The air had shifted, and though she sought to dominate, there was a crack in her confidence. With deliberate calm, I placed a thick folder on the table between us, the sum of my long months of quiet labor. Inside were the documents that revealed the truth: trusts, contracts, letters, and statements carefully gathered with Joan's steady help. This folder was my proof, my weapon, my shield. I looked Abigail in the eye and said, "This house does not belong to you, nor to Thomas. It belongs to my grandchildren, their future, their legacy. It was never yours to wield." Her face betrayed the shock she tried so hard to mask. The facade she had constructed with so much effort wavered abruptly. Her eyes scanned the folder's contents, but the truth struck too hard to be ignored. These were not just papers, they were evidence of careful, intentional sidelining, the hiding of ownership, the twisting of legal instruments to exclude me. Thomas's discomfort grew, his eyes darting away from hers to meet mine, an unspoken apology lingering between us. He was a man caught between two worlds, and now his world was unraveling before him. He looked at me not as an adversary, but as the mother he once trusted, the quiet force who had finally found her voice. I laid out the evidence one piece at a time. The legally binding trust established years ago, crafted specifically for protecting my grandchildren's inheritance. The signatures, displaced or forged, the attempts to claim control over assets without proper authority. The letters I had found hidden, correspondence revealing attempts to marginalize me. Each revelation was a hammer strike on the house of cards Abigail had built around herself. The room grew heavy with silence as the truth unspooled, stripping away the polished claims and exposing the raw bones of a betrayal rooted in greed and manipulation. Abigail's expression flickered through denial, rage, and finally numb resignation. The fight had been calculated, but she had underestimated the quiet strength of a mother's love, patient, long-lasting, and sometimes slow to reveal until it was too late. I spoke again, softer now, but no less insistent. I am the guardian of this trust, the protector of what was built to safeguard our children's future. Your attempts to erase me will not succeed. Thomas nodded slowly, acknowledgment dawning in his eyes. There was distance in his gaze when he looked at Abigail, uncertain whether to defend her or to embrace the mother who stood before him, unbroken and resolute. The confrontation was deliberate and measured. There was no need for harsh words or attacks. The truth was the fiercest weapon in the room, cutting through layers of deception and silencing the false scripts Abigail had written for herself. As I sat there, folder in hand, I felt the resurgence of a power I had thought lost, not the loud power of threats or dominance, but a quiet, undeniable authority that comes from knowing one's worth and fighting calmly and persistently for justice. This was more than reclaiming a house. It was a resurrection of dignity, a restoration of the maternal role I had been denied, and a promise that the future I had worked for would not be stolen. In those moments, I saw the cracks in Abigail's armor widen. Her control, so carefully maintained, was fast slipping away. Thomas, caught between two sides, looked to me for guidance, and I gave none lightly. Instead, I offered steady presence. This family was torn, but the bonds of blood and love were not so easily broken. The victory I claimed was quiet but profound. The truth laid bare was more powerful than any scream or confrontation. The house, once a symbol of exclusion, was becoming a symbol of justice and preservation. The battle was far from over, but this confrontation marked a turning point. Abigail's ambitions, once so dominant, now faced the slow, steady unraveling caused by transparency and truth. Thomas, torn inside, began tentatively to reconnect with the mother he had neglected but never truly forsaken. I stood firm, not out of anger, but from a deep, unwavering love that had been refined by years of hardship and solitude. The silence that once held me down was now my sanctuary, a shield behind which I stood unshakably. This was my home, my legacy, my family, and it was time to reclaim it with quiet strength and certainty that no force could diminish. I would not shout and rage. I would speak softly but carry the enduring power of a mother's love, the kind that does not falter, does not yield, and never fades. After Abigail and Thomas finally left, the silence that fell upon the house was different, no longer cold or oppressive, but gentle and expectant. It was as if every room, every corner, was holding its breath in quiet relief. I walked through those familiar halls slowly, letting the memories wash over me without the sharp sting of exclusion. The photographs on the walls, the worn furniture, the light filtering through the curtains, everything seemed to soften, as though welcoming me back into the home I had long cared for and never truly abandoned. As I touched the worn edges of the photo frames, I let my mind drift to those moments captured in faded colors. The laughter of grandchildren spilling down the stairs, the quiet Sunday afternoons when the house felt full with love, the small everyday joys that built a family's soul. These were not just images, but promises, the legacy of love I had protected through the darkest hours. Now, they seemed to affirm that no betrayal could erase what was real and lasting. Moving through the rooms, I sensed the weight of what I had reclaimed, not just bricks and mortar, but dignity and peace. This house was more than shelter. It was the heart of generations, a cradle of memories and hope that I would safeguard with every fiber of my being. The quiet victory I had found was profound because it came not from anger or confrontation, but from steadfast patience and the unwavering strength of a mother's love. The battle I had fought was not solely legal or physical, it was deeply emotional. I thought of the silent tears shed in solitude, the whispered prayers for justice, the long nights of reflection and planning. All those moments had built the quiet power now radiating within me. It was a power born from resilience and tempered with grace, a force that would protect my family's future no matter the cost. Stepping out into the garden, I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin, a balm to the sore place within. The flowers I had tended, roses, peonies, hydrangeas, nodded gently in the breeze, their colors vibrant against the green. They seemed to bloom brighter than ever, as though echoing my own rebirth. The earth beneath my hands was rich and full of life, a reminder that, like these blossoms, I too could grow beyond pain and blossom anew. I knelt to touch the soil and whispered a promise, to myself, to my grandchildren, to the history woven into this place, that I would nurture this home with love and care, that it would once again be a sanctuary of laughter and joy. The past, with all its hurt and betrayal, would not define me or the family I was sworn to protect. This liberation was a beginning, not an end. The house was a living testament to what had been lost and what could be rebuilt. The quiet peace that now filled it was fragile, but it was real, a space reclaimed not through force, but through the enduring strength of love and patience. I felt the weight of that responsibility deeply, knowing that my journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments when the shadows might attempt to creep back in. But I faced those uncertainties with a calm heart and the steady resolve of one who had weathered storms far greater. The laughter of my grandchildren, the touch of their small hands in mine, the future I had fought tirelessly to protect, these would be the joys that no door, no betrayal could ever take from me. The legacy of love and sacrifice passed down through generations would continue to flourish under my watchful care. As evening settled, casting long shadows across the garden, I stood on the porch and breathed deeply. The sky glowed softly with the promise of a new dawn. I smiled, feeling a quiet joy that only comes from knowing that, against the odds, you have reclaimed what is truly yours. This was home again. This was peace. This was a mother's victory, a silent, steady reclamation of everything that mattered. With the sun setting beyond the horizon, I stepped inside, heart full and spirit unbroken, ready to embrace the new life unfolding before me.